Joining us now is Admiral James Stavridis, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, also the author of the new novel, The Restless Wave. Admiral, the IDF said it hit Iran's aerial defense systems and missile manufacturing facilities, but avoided the nuclear and oil facilities. That was under weeks of U.S. pressure, several weeks. Do you think Iran will respond? There was some hope among U.S. officials that if they did respond, it would be drones, a few missile launches, but that this would be the end of the cycle.
I think it will be the end of the cycle. Let's call it 80% chance it'll be the end of the cycle. Iran knows that if they continue to escalate, Israel will hit them much harder next time, will go after their economy via the oil and gas, and will go after the nuclear facilities. I don't think Tehran has the stomach for that, at least at this moment. So call it 80% chance we see at least a temporal pause here. And that brings us back to the conversation you just had with Raf. It does create a tiny bit of an opening. I kind of like the Egyptian strategy. Start small, build some confidence in the process. Let's hope it pays off.
And Admiral, Israeli officials said yesterday that Hamas last week, to their Egyptian counterparts, had flatly rejected an Israeli offer for them to have safe passage out of Gaza if the Hamas fighters would lay down their weapons. Is there any prospect of that, as Secretary Blinken has just returned from his 11th shuttle mission to try to get some kind of peace in Gaza, and has said very pointedly, take the win. You know, you've accomplished your goals. Sinwar is dead. Other leaders are dead. Mohammed Deif, the deputy to Sinwar. End the war in Gaza and get the humanitarian aid desperately needed into Gaza, into northern Gaza, by all those suffering people.
I am 100% in awe of Tony Blinken's shuttle diplomacy, and I pray to God that it pays off with some kind of a ceasefire deal. And I think that's pretty good advice to the Israelis. The one thing they have left to do, kind of the military center of gravity, the chore left behind, get rid of the tunnel complex under Gaza. They're in the process of doing that, decommissioning this 400 miles of tunnel. That's where Hamas trained, equipped, organized, and launched the attacks of October 7th. Once that's done, I don't see any reason for Israel to continue to try and occupy the Gaza Strip. They ought to do exactly as Secretary Blinken says. Let's get an Arab peacekeeping force in there, perhaps under UN chapeau, and let's start salvaging some kind of life for the people of Palestine.
And let me briefly ask you about Lebanon, because the U.S. has quite a mixed message after failing to get a ceasefire for Lebanon, a couple of weeks ago when all of the parties were at the United Nations. They're now calling for a halt in the attacks on Beirut, but they are saying that Israel is justified in hitting a stockpiling of weapons and Hezbollah's strongholds in pockets along the southern Lebanon border with Israel. Israel doesn't seem to be listening.
Well, first and foremost, we talked a moment ago about the tunnel complex being the remaining center of gravity in Gaza. The center of gravity up north is that stockpile of 140,000 surface-to-surface missiles. Israelis have every right to go after those. I don't think you have to go into Beirut in order to knock down 2/3 of those missiles. My advice to the Israelis would be focus on getting rid of the missile complex and building a buffer zone from your northern border to the Litani River, an enforceable buffer zone. Therefore, you can bring home your 60 to 70,000 Israeli families that have been displaced. I think that's a better strategy for them than targeting Beirut.
Admiral James Stavridis, thank you so much. And again, the Admiral's new book is The Restless Wave, a novel of the United States Navy.